All right, guys, I want to welcome back to the show for his annual appearance when we talk about the Toronto Blue Jays, Mr. Arden Zwelling of Sportsnet. Arden, thanks, man, for coming on and joining us again to talk about these Blue Jays that are going to be a very big topic of conversation, I think, in Yankees world all year long.
Yeah, it's good to be here, man. Seems like every year we think the Jays and Yankees are on like a collision course. I think that ALCS between the two of them would have been awesome last year if it had happened, and obviously it hadn't. But some of those games down the stretch between these two teams were wicked. So hopefully we get it this year.
Yeah, you guys have done some interesting things. I think you guys had a really good offseason, actually, and I think a couple of years ago, Yankees did some similar roster reconstruction based on it was a different type of roster reconstruction in the sense that they needed to balance some things out on the offensive side and defensive side. You guys did do, I think, that as well, but you brought in some really good veteran presence, which I think your team needed. There's such a solid core of young guys and talented guys that some of these moves that you guys made in the offseason really make your ceiling, I think, higher, and your floor higher as well. So it's just raising everything with the ability to lean on some guys that have been there. So let's just start there in the offseason, like how the Blue Jays constructed this roster and made some changes based on what they felt were their needs.
Well, yeah, I think the Blue Jays have been at this for a few years now, where they've been trying to really diversify the skill sets in their lineup. Like they've been trying to build more versatility positionally. They've been trying to be less redundant, less either we hit three home runs in the game and we win, or we get shut out, right? Like they've been trying to find different ways to win ball games and just not be so easy to match up against. Essentially, it's been a multi-year pursuit. And I think you're right that they took some really big steps this offseason towards that. So you balance out the lineup. It used to be last year, the Blue Jays were the most right-handed heavy lineup in baseball. And they saw the most right-handed pitching of any club in baseball. That won't be the case this year because you've got a Dalton Varsho in there and a Brandon Belt in there and a Kevin Kiermaier as well. So you have some left-handed bats balancing things out. It's a bit less thump and subtracting Teoscar Hernandez, but a bit more just differentiation in the way that you can score, a bit more ball in play, a bit more on base. There's more base running on this club when you're adding guys like Varsho and Kiermaier. These guys are very fast, very savvy on the base pass and run prevention as well. It's been a huge focus for the Blue Jays over the offseason. So Kiermaier's defensive, that speaks for itself. He's a Mount Rushmore defender in center field, but Dalton Varsho led all MLB outfielders in outs above average last year as well. So like that's a massive boost. Outfield defense, and then on the pitching side, you replace a Ross Stripling with a Chris Bassett from the Mets, who brings a little bit of that sort of the veteran presence that you were talking about. You also add Eric Swanson to the back end of the bullpen, and those late inning relievers. That's an area that got exposed by the Blue Jays in the postseason. So they hope that they've built in a bit more sturdiness there as well.
Yeah, the Kiermaier. I mean, you guys really solidified the outfield defense. I mean, that's a big deal. The run prevention, and you get Whit Merrifield for a full year as well. I think that you're seeing a lot more of these guys that have been around the block more with Kiermaier. I mean, Kiermaier, the defense that he provides for the Blue Jays, I think is going to be massive, just because the rotation's good. You guys have Ryu. He had Tommy John last June. So is he trying to come back mid-season ish? I know these guys are fighting back at a much faster clip than they ever have been. Is he shooting for a mid-season return?
Yeah, he's trying to come back around the All-Star break. We'll see how that goes. Like at his age, you never know, right? He's 36 years old. So we'll see how that looks when he's back on a mound, but not exactly a guy who ever relied on velocity. He relied on throwing five
He's a
different
pitcher.
pitches and exactly commanding, locating, controlling the zone, things like that, not walking anybody, getting soft contact. So it could be that he comes back and looks like his old self, or it could be that he comes back and he's 36 and looks like he did right before he went down to Tommy John. You don't know. Blue Jays aren't banking on it though, right? Like they've
Yeah.
built the rotation around Alek Manoah and Kevin Gossman at the top, and then you add in Chris Bassett into there. They're going to hope for a bounce back from Jose Barrios and hope that Yusei Kikuchi could be a serviceable two trips through five and dive fifth starter. And beyond that, if whatever they can get from Ryu over the back half of the season, they'll take.
So the power that you guys lost going back into I'm going to jump all over the place here. There's
Yeah.
zero structure with this show. Teoscar Hernandez is and Gurriel Jr. also two guys I think that were impactful guys, played on the team, and were performers. Obviously, they went a little bit different with Varsho now and defense. How are they going to? Do you think it will hurt them in scoring runs? It seems like you guys still have a ton of production ready guys that will come in here and step up. So what do you think about how they're going to pick up from Teoscar Hernandez specifically?
Well, yeah, the thesis of the roster is that they can produce the same amount of runs as they have in prior years. They can just do it in different ways. They aren't going to be as reliant on the home run ball and as reliant on slugging. So the Blue Jays are going to try to put the ball in play more. They're going to try to move runners more, more first to third, more honestly bunting for base hits. Like that's something that Dalton Varsho does better than anybody in the game. And Brandon Belt's done it a ton too when he was getting shifted aggressively. Obviously, he's not going to see those shifts as much now, but he's still like one of the best on base guys in the game, like one of the lowest ground ball percentages, and a guy with a really great approach. The other thing is the walls at Rogers Center are coming in. There's new dimensions in the outfield with the renovations. So the right center field alley is like 359 now. So you take a guy
Wow.
like Brandon Belt, who was playing at Oracle, where it's like
Yeah.
412 with wind blowing in off McCovey Cove, and you put
Yeah.
him into a dome with 359 to right center. It's a guy who might just golf a bunch of home runs. So for Varsho as well, with his left-handed power approach, I mean, that could be big for him. And then you look at a guy like Matt Chapman, who actually drives a good amount of balls to the opposite field and in the air. Could be big for him as well. But just to get back to your question, like the Blue Jays are going to try to produce runs in different ways so they avoid some of the extended power slumps that they've had in the past when balls just aren't leaving the yard for one reason or another. And the Blue Jays would lose a bunch of games because they weren't able to score without hitting home runs. They're hopeful now that they're going to be producing just as much, if not more, but just kind of doing it differently with a ball and play approach.
You're seeing that around the league a lot. I mean, one, you saw the three true outcome, which led to, I think, a lot of the changes in Major League Baseball and seeing how everybody's trying to make the game more exciting. But the personnel is obviously leading towards that as well. More bat to ball, get the defense moving, see what happens rather than trying to club it over the fence. So the new changes, obviously they've made adjustments. I don't know how much of that was purely based on performance or also understanding how the game is going to change as well because of the shift. But what are your thoughts on the new changes in baseball, specifically the shift, the pitch clock, all those things, and how that led into some of the adjustments that the Blue Jays made in the offseason?
I love the pitch clock personally. I mean,
Yeah.
you're seeing a meaningful change in time of game, and you're not losing any action from the sport. You're losing adjusting batting gloves and taking a walk around the mound and mound visits and pitcher and catcher not being on the same page and stepping off, etc. You're not losing any actual like pitches or swings or defensive plays. So that's great. I think the shift restriction isn't going to have a huge impact on batting average. We saw in the minor leagues it went up 2 points. So it's not massive, but I do think it is going to allow some up the middle players to show some more of their athleticism. So like for you guys, that'd be Volpe. Like obviously for the Blue Jays, that's Bo Bichette ranging from the shortstop position, and then Santiago Espinal ranging from second base as well. So I think you're just going to see a lot more of that athleticism on display, which is a good thing. But I don't think it's going to be like as dramatic of an impact for left-handed hitters as some people think it might be. You can still see some like Joey Gallo-esque defensive alignments
Everybody
where you're
brings up
shifting
Joey
over.
Gallo.
I know.
Everybody brings up Joey Gallo, and I'm here to say this. Like I gotta say it again because
Yeah.
the people that listen to my show are exhausted. I've been exhausted. It's a miracle when the bat and the ball connect when Joey Gallo's in the box because he swings on the same plane every single time. It's a mistake from the pitcher at that point when that guy makes contact. You know what I mean? Like it's a Joey Gallo effect. It's like that guy has a job. It's a miracle. But yeah, totally
Well, maybe
understand.
I
Mark
should use
Teixeira,
Rizzo as the example.
yeah,
Rizzo,
Mark
right?
Teixeira, Rizzo, yeah. That's about. I like that
Yeah.
one.
The Blue Jays used a lot of four-man outfields against Rizzo last year.
Yeah,
I remember.
yeah.
So yeah, you're not gonna be. They can't do that anymore. Like they can't use those alignments, but they can still sort of shift their outfielders over and get creative with it. So I don't think it's gonna be a massive difference for guys like Rizzo and Belt, but a point or two of batting average. I don't know. That's something. That's a step in the right direction. The ball being in play more often. Us as fans seeing more action.
Yeah, and I think systematically when you're looking at how the launch angle and the three true outcome came, like the ball was juiced. Everybody was trying to take advantage of that, hit the ball out. I think you're going to see this with like a longer tail, right? You're going to have like you'll see guys, not shying away from getting on base and actually running the base pass and stealing bases even. I think a lot of the analytics people are going to start looking at stolen bases in a different light because of the higher success rate based on the base paths and the fact that they can get bigger jumps because the guys can't throw over enough or as many times. So there's some really interesting things that go into play. But you guys look like your personnel, they're lining up to whether they're massive differences in the batting averages or we're seeing it in the statistics. It looks like your personnel is definitely matching up for the way that the game is going to be changing.
Well, to your point, like stolen base activity, we saw it go up a ton in the minors last
Yeah.
year with the new rules, and we saw it go up a ton in spring training this year. So I'd expect that to continue in the regular season for MLB. And the Blue Jays definitely built a roster that can exploit that. When you add guys like Kiermaier and Varsho, who are like very, very fast players, you've already got a Whit Merrifield who's very fast and active on the base pass. Matt Chapman's faster than you think he is. Bo Bichette can steal bases. Kevin Biggio can steal bases. George Springer, although he's like 33, actually has pretty good sprint
Yeah, he
speed. The
does.
Blue Jays might
Mhm.
they might lead the league in like fast old guys. When you think about like Springer, Kiermaier, Whit Merrifield, like Brandon Belt's the one old guy on the club who can't really run. If anything, it's the young guys on the Blue Jays who don't run that well, and Alejandro Kirk and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. But essentially, everyone else on the roster runs. And one thing we learned about John Schneider when he took over as manager midway through last season was he likes action. Like he likes start runners, he likes hit and run, he likes movement, he likes to be aggressive on the base pass, he likes first to third, second to home. And we already saw in the Blue Jays season opener, Kevin Kiermaier made an amazing read going first to third on a blooper that fell just past the shortstop that honestly could have won the Blue Jays that game. Like it created a run for them. So that's something that the Blue Jays are really prioritizing is base running, those little things like we mentioned, run prevention, all that stuff, like how that all kind of accumulates to create wins. They want to be able to win in more ways than just out slugging teams.
Do the Blue Jays? I mean, obviously they're coming into this season with full expectations of World Series, taking the AL East. Do you think that this infusion of veteran guys has changed the culture in the clubhouse at all? I've saw some people writing and talking about the culture of the Blue Jays clubhouse. How has that been affected, and what did they do to affect as much as they could with personnel?
Yeah, I just spent a month with them in Florida, and it is very noticeable. The attention to detail, the meticulousness, the intensity. Like there are some intense dudes in that clubhouse. Even think about Chris Bassett on the other side of the ball as a guy who's one of the fieriest, most intense competitors out there. And then I think, yeah, they're like their reputations of a Kiermaier, a Belt who's been a multiple time champion, even like
Yeah.
a George Springer from his time in Houston. Bo Bichette's an incredibly intense player. So yeah, there's a lot of focus and drive and determination here. Like the Blue Jays shouldn't be short on motivation after the way that their last two seasons ended. 2021 ended with them being a game out of the postseason and watching like the Boston Red Sox win on the last day of the regular season to take that spot from them. And then 2022 ends with a two-game wild card loss to the Seattle Mariners, the second game of which the Blue Jays were up 8-1 and blew a massive lead, and like just everything, like the wheels completely fell off over the final few innings of that game. So this is a club that should have all the motivation in the world to take care of the little things and to take the wins that are on hand for them. And I do think it is definitely a different feel, a different culture, a different vibe, and just a different level of attention and focus to detail this year than there has been in years prior.
When you're looking at like mid-season and we're shaping this the AL East up and identifying who's doing what and all of these things, two questions about that. One, minor league system. Who's coming up? I know there's a pitcher starting in Double A, I believe that has top 30 ranked in MLB that looks to potentially contribute. So asking about the minor league guys, who else should we be on the lookout for that could come up and contribute in 23? And then, just how do you gauge what the front office is anticipating? Like, what do you think that they're willing to do? Are they willing to go out and make that big move? Are they willing to spend the money that is necessary at the trade deadline if need be, if a guy went down, or if they identify a must need piece to take them over the edge? How do you feel that they're going to react to the deadline at that point?
Well, yeah, on the prospect side, Ricky Tiedemann is the guy that you're thinking of, and he's
Yep.
absolutely a top pitching prospect in baseball, but he's also 20, right? So,
Yeah.
and he's got something like 18 innings at Double A. It's very few innings at Double A, and he dealt with a shoulder issue in spring training. So the Blue Jays are going to try to get him to a good spot in Double A this year to begin the season. I imagine they'll start him with some shorter outings to manage his workload. Like, he's a guy who got caught up in the pandemic when he was sort of in the draft, and he went the junior college route and had only like 37 innings, and then got into the Blue Jays system and didn't get to pitch very much. So he's still very much learning the rhythms and the routines of like being a professional pitcher. He's a very young
Yeah.
guy, and he's still trying to build that workload that the Blue Jays hope he'll be a foundational piece for him as he continues on into his big league career. Like, it's absolutely exceptional stuff, and the strikeout numbers in the minors are ridiculous, but there's still a lot of development there. So he could be a factor over the back half of the season out of the bullpen if everything goes right. The guy who could be a factor a lot sooner than that is Nate Pearson, and I don't know how much of a
Oh,
prospect he is anymore.
yeah. We talked
I
about Nate Pearson like 2 to 3 years ago, I think, as the guy. And I know he's battled some injuries, but when he's got all the talent in the world. It's a matter of him staying on the field, it seems.
Absolutely. And he pitched very well in the Venezuelan Winter League over the winter, and then came into spring training like continuing to look exceptional. The fastball velocity has been like sitting 98 up into low triple digits, top 10 average fastball velocity across spring training in any camp. This spring, he's in a new role. He's in a relief role. He's no longer starting, so he's focusing on just one inning. You could extend him to 2 innings if you needed to, but he's really just focusing on just being a one inning reliever, and he's going to start at AAA Buffalo. The Blue Jays told him, like, carry this momentum from the winter and spring into Buffalo, force our hand, like, earn your call up. And as long as Nate Pearson stays healthy, he should be blowing hitters away because the stuff is extraordinary. So he's a guy who could be up in the Blue Jays bullpen very soon. Go
Why
ahead.
don't you think he broke camp? He
The
seems
Blue
like a
Jays
guy
just
that they've seen enough where if he's healthy, you want that talent up in the major leagues.
The Blue Jays just have a ton of bullpen depth right now is the thing, and not much of it is optionable. Like, their only optionable guys are the guys who you would not option, like Jordan Romano, who's their closer, Eric Swanson, who's a key setup guy for them, Tim Meza, who's like their only lefty in the bullpen, Adam Simber, who like has the most appearances in MLB over the last 2 seasons and is like a really key matchup piece for them. So the guys that they could option, they wouldn't. And I think they also want like Nate Pearson to earn his way to the big leagues. You know, they don't want to hand him anything. Like, they really do want him driven and focused and motivated and knocking down the door and forcing their hand. So his time will come, as will like Jay Jackson's, who's starting at AAA for the Blue Jays, and that is a big league arm, like a big league reliever, a guy who had opportunities to be in opening day bullpens elsewhere and chose to sign with the Blue Jays on a split deal because he's ring chasing at this point in his career. He's like 35. There's a guy, Zach Pop, who's in the Blue Jays bullpen right now, who's optionable, who throws like a 97-mile-per-hour sinker and a wicked slider. Like, the Blue Jays just have good bullpen depth right now, so that's why Pearson got squeezed out. To the second part of your question, what will they do at the deadline? I think they'll be looking for starting pitching because the starting pitching depth is not that deep. Bullpen depth is, starting pitching depth not so much. Beyond the top five for the Blue Jays right now, Ryu's on the IL. Mitch White would have been an option, but he's also on the IL with an elbow issue. Like, you're looking at like the Drew Hutchisons of this world and the Zach Thompsons who came over from Pittsburgh. It's not great depth. So if the Blue Jays had some underperformance in their rotation or injuries, they would really struggle to like replace it with major league caliber pitching at this point. So I think they would be looking for starting pitching at the deadline, and I think they will like go all in for it at that point because we're already seeing them being a luxury tax team this year for the first time in their history. And I don't think that you spend into that tier and put together a roster like this to stop when it's clear that you need something else to get it to the finish line.
I mean, the rotation's good with Manoah, Gosman, Bassett, Barrios. Do you expect, has Barrios, did he have a good camp? Because he's obviously the big surprise, I think, from last year on my side that, he struggled as much as he did. It seemed like he had some very good outings, but some terrible outings as well. He really was a mixed bag of results when he came on. So what are you expecting from him? And Manoah, Gosman are clearly going to anchor that rotation. But yeah, I will say this: it's hard to have depth in a starting rotation period on a major league team, right? Because there's only so many spots for that particular skill set unless you're going to pitch in the minor leagues, and those guys are in the major league. So we're running into that same issue right now because of injuries, and unless you have just a stacked group of young guys ready to come up, it's hard to keep around those veteran guys because they're needed around the league.
100%. Barrios is the big swing piece in this rotation because the track record is so exceptional. When he was with the Twins, it was like 5 straight seasons of every year, 32
Yeah,
starts and like a 3.5, 3.7 ERA, and he was just so reliable and so durable. And then last season, after he signs a big 7-year extension with the Blue Jays, all of a sudden things imploded and he
yeah,
gave up the most earned runs of any pitcher in baseball, the most hits. It was like a 5.5 ERA. He had some truly disastrous outings. He had plenty of good ones and plenty where he
yeah,
looked like the Minnesota guys, but there was like 10 or 11 where it just spiraled and it was like disaster outing, not just, oh, I gave up 4 runs over 4 innings. It was I gave up 7 over 2. And there was a lot going on there. There's a little bit of pitch tipping going on in teams that clearly kind of knew what was coming. There was some really poor fastball command at times where he left four seamers, particularly the left-handed hitters, in really bad spots. Lefties slugged something like 730 against his four-seam fastball last year, which is like Barry Bonds type of stuff. It's
yeah,
just
yeah,
absolute video game numbers. So he left fastballs in really bad locations. He got a little bit predictable. Obviously, when you're giving up that many runs and things are going that poorly, that's going to impact your mentality on the mound and that's going to impact your confidence. So that led into it as well. So there's been just a ton of tweaks and a ton of tinkering that's gone on and moving him on the rubber and changes to his mechanics and changes to approach to try to get him back to a place where he can be the Minnesota guy again. He looked great this spring when he was in Blue Jays camp. And then he went and pitched one outing for Puerto Rico at the WBC and got absolutely rocked by Venezuela,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
which is interesting because in Blue Jays camp, you're working on stuff and you're tinkering. But the WBC, you're trying to get outs
Right,
efficiently,
right.
like you're competing. So
Yeah.
there's huge question marks about what Jose Barrios is going to bring in the regular season. Nobody can tell you what he is going to be this year. All I can say is he's a massive swing piece because if you get the Minnesota guy again, that's the best number 4 in the league. But if he is melting down consistently again, then the Blue Jays have an issue.
And is the coaching staff looking at mechanics and they're thinking he's in a good place and now we're between, because that's the scary part. If we're between the ears and mechanics are in a decent spot, there's only one person that can fix that, and it's the guy that is between those ears.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, to Jose Barrios' credit, he never stopped trying last year to figure it out. Like every time, it was funny, every outing he was a different guy. His hands were in a different spot. He was in a different place on the rubber. He was throwing different sequences. He was, sometimes doing different things with his mouth guard. Like there's all kinds of tinkering
Oof.
that the Blue Jays had him go through just to try to get him to a good spot. A lot of that had to do with the pitch tipping. Like the Blue Jays really believed, and I believe it was the Guardians as well, who clearly had something on him. Because you go back and you look at those outings, and they're just not offering it really good breaking balls. And they are not, there was like 0 swinging strikes in those outings. And Jose Barrios, is a guy who, when he's on, even if he's leaving pitches in bad places and those are getting hammered, he's still able to get swinging strikes with his slur because it's that good and his two-seamer moves that much. So that the Blue Jays are encouraged that the stuff is as good as it's always been. The velo's been there, the movement, the action, that's all been there. The location and command just wasn't as good at times last year. So they do believe that they can help them figure this out. But look, there's a 7-year, $131 million extension here riding behind this as well. So it very much is something they need to figure out because they're going to be in the Jose Barrios business for a very long time.
Yeah, no, definitely. All right. So looking around the division, what are your thoughts on what you're seeing from these other teams? It does seem like Yankees and Blue Jays are the two I'd say that are ahead. you can never rule out the Rays ever because they just seemingly will throw another guy that you've never heard of, and he'll have a career year, and multiple guys usually. Um, Orioles are certainly, extremely talented, up and coming, playing with the we got nothing to lose type mentality, and then there's a Cora factor in Boston, which I always have a hard time getting completely past. Even though I'm seeing what's on paper, I know what their roster looks like. For some reason, that guy can just get a lot of out of some players. So yeah, what are your thoughts around the division?
I think between the top three teams, it's going to be a bloodbath. Like the
Yeah,
Blue Jays, Yankees, and Rays. I think those three teams, I don't know what the order is going to be, but it's going to be like 95 wins, 94 wins, 93 wins. And it could be, depending on luck and one-run games, it could be any order of those three. But I think those are three playoff teams. And I think it's going to be right down to the end for who wins the division. Blue Jays play the Yankees a lot down the stretch. Blue Jays play the Rays a lot down the stretch. I haven't checked, but I'd imagine the Yankees play the Rays a lot down the stretch as well. So
yeah. They've
September,
the
it's going to be huge. Go ahead.
They're how do you like the new schedules with the balance, because we're not playing each other as many times? How do you think that factors in? Because you're right. I think at the end of the season, you start seeing a lot of the divisional opponents, which I like. I think that's a good thing because you should flesh it out at the end against the people that are in the same division. At least the
It's
large
huge
majority.
for those three teams because you're getting into the AL Central more often, right? And you're getting
Yeah,
into
right.
the you're getting into Oakland more often. You're getting into the poor NL teams that in past years you might not have seen at all. Like you might not have seen a Reds at all at any point. So it's great if you're the Yankees, Rays, Blue Jays. It's not great if you're the Twins or Guardians because you're like, hey, we used to get to beat up on the Royals all the time and the White Sox, right? Like now they have to go and play some tougher competition. So I think the balanced schedule definitely benefits the clubs in this division. And I think that for a fan, it's just cool that you are guaranteed, whether you're watching on TV because they're on the road or because like San Diego's coming to your place, you're going to get to see a Soto and you're definitely going to get to see a Tatis or whatever have you. Every team in baseball is going to get a chance to see Otani, whether your team's on the road playing him or he's coming to your house. So it's huge from that aspect. To get back to the AL East, like I think the Orioles, I don't think this is their year, but I think they're a problem going forward. You look at that minor league
They
system and
are.
some of the players they're going to be graduating, like they are right now where the Blue Jays were a couple years ago when Bichette was getting to the majors and Guerrero and Manoah were getting to the majors. So you're seeing that now with like Henderson and Adley and Grayson Rodriguez whenever they finally call him up, DJ Hall or DL Hall, whatever his name is. So I like they're there. They just need to invest more in their roster. Like they should have signed Carlos Correa. Like when Correa was, getting out of deals in this place and that place, and like his price kept coming down, the Orioles should have gone and gotten him and kickstarted that rebuild. And they didn't do it, but they should have. And then the Red Sox could be just a spectacular disaster, honestly. Depending on how things. I know you mentioned the core effect, but I just think that roster could completely implode. It's so weird how they're like letting guys like Bogarts go, but then also extending Devers to insane
Makes no
amounts.
sense.
They're kind of right. They're 1 foot in each side. So I think it's the top three teams really that are going to fight it out to the end. The Yankees just need to get their rotation healthy, which I think they will. The Rays are going to be the Rays. They're going to be incredible. And then the Blue Jays are just really well balanced and well constructed right now.
Yeah, I agree, man. It's going to be a dogfight. It's going to be a lot of fun. The Orioles. I mean, Adley Rutschman is he's a Hall of Fame catcher essentially. Like that's the pedigree right there. You know what I mean? Like, but you
Yeah.
see it in the kid. He's got all the things. Like really, there was so much hype about him, but he's every bit of it. It really does seem like he's going to be one of the greats. And it's when you can see it that early, just like the it factor type. And you could build around it. But that's a really good point about Correa. That would have been a perfect opportunity. It would have been because of all of the trouble he had signing these contracts and getting him in there. You add a superstar like that into the mix of all of that talent. You're right. That could have been a really big shakeup in how that team evolves if you add a guy like that to the mix. That's a really good point. I didn't think about that one.
It just accelerated their process to getting back to contention, right? Like they're looking up at three beasts in this division, so they have to do stuff like that. Like I think that they just need to be more active in free agency, honestly. Like they need to be spending more money and I'm sure they've got an owner who's going to cry poor. But like, I don't know, we know what these owners make, right? Like, there's no
Yeah, yeah.
baseball contracts for them, but we understand like what these franchises are worth. So, like the Orioles absolutely need to be in like the playing at the top of the free agent market now with this young like core that they have. They need to help it. Like they need to supplement it. It's not like they have a franchise shortstop that Correa would have been replacing. It's like Jorge
No,
Mateo
he's
is there.
he's
Okay,
he's the
move him
perfect.
to
You
second.
nailed it.
All right.
Yeah. You're right. It,
So
yeah, no, it would have been the perfect addition. It really would have been. It solidified the middle of the field too with Rushman behind the plate. So cool, man. Well, hey, I appreciate the time as always. Guys, give Arden a follow on Twitter. All the blue checks are going away. Who the hell knows what's going on Twitter? But at Arden Zwelling, you can get some really good coverage of the Blue Jays and know where they stand as we're going to be battling it out with them all year. But Arden, good luck this year, man, and great to see you.
yeah, thanks, man. Cannot wait for these Jays Yankees games. They're going to be awesome this year. Manoa v. Cole crossing the Audi sign. People remember that. It's going to be great.